In yesterday's video, I gave you my 2019-2020 Stanley Cup playoff predictions. In today's video, we're going to stick with the prediction theme. I'm going to give you 5 bold predictions of things I see happening in the NHL during the upcoming offseason. We'll get into that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we're going to continue on with some predictions here for the NHL, except today we're doing 5 bold predictions of things that I think will happen at the end of the regular season into the current NHL offseason that's going to be coming up here in a very short period of time. Before you know it, the playoffs are going to come and go, and it's going to be a very busy, very interesting offseason. So let's jump on here with the 5 bold predictions I see that are going to happen this coming summer. Bold prediction number 1. We are going to get a massive, huge trade between the Minnesota Wild and the New York Islanders. Now, there was talk about this leading into the NHL trade deadline of something that was kind of being discussed, something that was brewing, but never came to be. And I'm pretty convinced that they're going to revisit this during the offseason when both teams have a little bit more time, a little bit more flexibility, and they will get this figured out to make it happen. Now, this trade would have involved the Minnesota Wild sending forward Zach Parise over to the New York Islanders in exchange for Andrew Ladd, and there was other pieces as well. Of course, many consider Zach Parise and Andrew Ladd's contracts both to be, unfavorable. Neither contract's really been totally fulfilled to their full potential. I think that's fair to say. I think Parise certainly had more productivity during his tenure with the Wild than Ladd has during his time with the Islanders, although I think it's also fair to say both have had pretty respectable NHL careers. I think it's also fair to say they could both benefit from a change of scenery. Now, the rumored package here was Andrew Ladd along with Kiefer Bellows, who's one of the Islanders' top prospects, and a first-round pick. Now, the main reason there were additions onto the Islanders' side of things going to the Wild is that Parise's contract has more money and more term on it, so they had to kind of sweeten the pot a little bit to take that on. Of course, the Islanders would be getting rid of Andrew Ladd, which would be a big help to them, but there's less money and less term left on that contract. So I do think this is a deal who could benefit both teams. It gets the Minnesota Wild a first-round pick. It gets the Minnesota Wild a really solid prospect in Kiefer Bellows. Of course, his dad, Brian Bellows, played for the previous incarnation of Minnesota, the Minnesota North Stars, for a long time as well. So it's certainly fitting for him to play in Minnesota. Zach Parise goes to the Islanders, gets to play for a GM and Lou Lamoriello that he's very familiar with. Of course, Lamoriello, formerly of the New Jersey Devils, where Zach Parise started his career and played for a long time before signing as an unrestricted free agent with the Minnesota Wild. Of course, the Wild signed Parise and defenseman Ryan Suter to those matching mega long-term deals at the same time a number of years back. But I do think it's time that the Wild go into a little bit more of a rebuild mode. Bill Guerin's kind of already started that process with some of the other moves he's made, and he will dive further into this with a Zach Parise trade this summer. Now, unfortunately, the Islanders did trade their first-round pick in the to the Ottawa Senators this year for Jean-Gabriel Pageau, so they won't be able to include a 2020 first if they were to get this done ahead of the draft. But I think by the time we get to the draft is likely when discussions are going to probably heat up, and perhaps we'll see some other picks or maybe a 2021 pick or something like that included. But the offseason before free agency hits is when teams have more flexibility cap-wise and they can actually do more deals that are bigger in nature like this one would be. So I see that deal happening. Let me know what your thoughts are down in the comments if you think they're going to revisit this trade, and we'll see it happen this summer. Bold prediction number 2. St. Louis Blues captain Alex Pietrangelo unfortunately leaves the St. Louis Blues as an unrestricted free agent, mainly due to the fact that the Blues just can't offer enough money to keep him in town. Clearly, he's a valued member of their team. He's been a captain. He's putting up career numbers yet again. He's a tremendous player for them. Helped them win the Stanley Cup last year. They're in a great position to go on another deep playoff run this year. But unfortunately, I think it's going to be too tempting for him after everything he's achieved in St. Louis. The money that's going to be thrown at him as a UFA this coming summer is going to be too much for him to leave on the table, and he will end up leaving town. Now, where does he go? It's difficult to say, but I would not rule out the possibility of him signing with the Maple Leafs. Now, I'm not just saying that to make another big-time player go to the Leafs, because obviously, as we know, a lot of rumors are linked to that team, especially when it comes to top players. But in all honesty, it does make sense. He's from the Toronto area. He's from King City, which isn't too far from Toronto. So obviously, as a child, he probably grew up a Leaf fan. So there is that connection just for it being close to home. Clearly, the Maple Leafs are going to have a little bit more flexibility with what they do this summer. They get a lot of unrestricted free agent players that they may not necessarily bring back, and they could likely make some other moves to kind of free up some space here. They need that big-time right shot defenseman, and he could be that guy for them. So I'm not saying for sure he goes to the Leafs. The prediction is that he leaves St. Louis, but I do think the Toronto Maple Leafs are a top destination that will likely do their best to lure him in to sign with their organization instead. But either way, unfortunately, I think his reign as captain comes to an end in St. Louis this coming summer. Bold prediction number 3. We see another significant, massive trade out of Western Canada with the Calgary Flames really attacking that core after yet another disappointing regular and playoff season, and they trade longtime top forward Johnny Gaudreau. Now, obviously, the Flames right now are still battling for a playoff spot. In my prediction video yesterday, I did predict them to get into the playoffs, but I don't see them going very far in the playoffs, likely with a first-round exit. Based on last year's performance, the regular season was tremendous, then a poor playoff performance, and then another one here this year. I just think the Flames need to do something a little bit more significant, and we're not going to see the exact same core players return. And to me, if you look around the organization and what would make the most sense, I think there'd be a lot of interest in Johnny Gaudreau, who's having a little bit of a subpar season. His numbers aren't down drastically, but certainly had his struggles, I think is fair to say, this year. And I think there'd be a lot of interest, possibly sending him to the Metro Division between the Flyers, Devils, like one of those teams that would be close to home for him. I think a team like New Jersey is going to be looking to make some moves this summer. That very well could be a possibility. I know the Flyers have been linked to Gaudreau before, but it's hard to say how they would make that work, but they do have enough good solid forwards they could possibly move out in a good hockey trade in return. It's difficult to say exactly where he goes, but I do think the Flames are going to be frustrated with lack of success, lack of moving the team forward, and that the next move is going to be to trade a significant player, and Gaudreau is going to be that guy to go. Bold prediction number 4. Joe Thornton leaves San Jose as an unrestricted free agent, signs with another team to chase down a Stanley Cup. We've seen a disgruntled, unhappy Joe Thornton after the trade deadline express the fact that he was not happy that he didn't get traded at the deadline. He wanted a shot, he wanted an opportunity, and he did not get it. Now, clearly, that means that the teams that he was willing to go to just didn't have enough interest to make it happen. It was rumored that he only would accept a trade to an elite level cup contending team. So we're talking about 2 or 3 teams that he was really interested in, based on reports at least. And he was interested in the Bruins, maybe the Dallas Stars, the Avalanche to a degree. I think were the 2 or 3 teams that were kind of in the mix. Obviously, Boston was, where he started. He was interested in the Stars, the connection with Joe Pavelski there, and they're a really strong team. I think there was 1 or 2 other teams that might have been on his list, but amongst the teams that apparently were interested, weren't on his list, and the teams that he wanted just didn't see him high enough or as a big enough priority to make it happen. Of course, we've seen his longtime buddy and teammate Patrick Marleau get dealt to the Pittsburgh Penguins, so he'll have his opportunity to chase a cup. And Joe is going to want that next year. I think he's going to lose faith in the San Jose Sharks organization and get that cup for him. Clearly what they went through this year was a bit of a blip. They had a lot of unusual things go down with the Sharks this year, but I think he's going to lose confidence that organization is going to be where he needs to be to get that Stanley Cup, and he will sign elsewhere with one of the more elite teams around the NHL to get that Stanley Cup championship finally under his belt. Bold prediction number 5. The San Jose Sharks first round selection in the 2020 draft, which now belongs to the Ottawa Senators as part of that Erik Karlsson trade, gets picked as number 1 in the lottery and lands the Ottawa Senators' top draft choice, Alexis Lafreniere. Now, with this Erik Karlsson trade to the San Jose Sharks, many people really thought it was an underwhelming return when that trade first went down, when you seen the return package going to the Senators. But now that we've had a little bit more time to analyze it, a little bit more time to look at the pieces going back to the Senators, I think it's probably fair to say that they did relatively well. I mean, they're going to have a high pick in this 2020 NHL draft, and even if it's not Lafreniere, it's going to be a really solid prospect player who's likely going to have a solid career considering how good this draft is. They got them Chris Tierney, who's continuing to put up really solid numbers. They got another good prospect in Rudy Balcers. They got a really solid prospect in Josh Norris, who's developing well ahead. Of course, they had Dylan DeMello as well, who they've since flipped for another draft pick. So they had a lot in that deal. Now, I know some of the pieces coming back might not have been as well known to a big chunk of the hockey world, given the fact that they belong to the Sharks. I know the East Coast part of the NHL fan group between Canada and the US might not be as familiar all the time with West Coast stuff, but clearly there was a lot of good pieces in there. And I know going into this, I could not have predicted myself that first round pick would have been such a high pick. I didn't think they'd bombed this bad, not even close. But the fact is, it's worked out that way. And even though the Senators a couple of years back gave up a first-round pick in that Matt Duchene trade, which I know they were highly criticized for, where they decided to draft Brady Tkachuk, give up their pick the following year, which the Avalanche used to get Bo Byram, and he's going to be a real solid hockey player. Now they're going to get 2 this year and make up for that. So that's really looks good on Dorian to kind of recoup his pieces. Clearly that Duchene trade did not work out. He really did get fleeced, but he did really well in the Erik Karlsson trade and others since to really stockpile the cupboards. And I think that San Jose Sharks pick is going to turn out to be Alexis Lafreniere for the Ottawa Senators, which would be an absolute stud piece to add to really accelerate this rebuild. I think we're going to see a big movement here from Ottawa to get back things to get things back being a lot more competitive next year. I don't necessarily think they're going to be a playoff team next year, but I think they're going to make big strides, and within 2 to 3 years, they could possibly be a powerhouse. The only real concern moving forward is ownership and his ability to pay these young players once they earn the big money. So let me know what your thoughts are of my bold predictions for the upcoming NHL offseason. And of course, I'd like to know what yours are. Let me know what your bold predictions are down in the comments and we can discuss further. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and turning on your notifications so you don't miss any future content. And give this video a thumbs up as well if you enjoyed it. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you for watching, and I will catch you next time.